Hey sports fans, here's a tip to keep in mind the next time you make your betting picks. According to research, home field advantage is no joke, especially in those playoffs. In the NBA and the NFL postseason, the home team typically has a 64% shot at victory. Now, go get lucky. See you in Las Vegas. Let's get lucky.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
A new week starts right here, right now, live on a Monday morning on the early line on SportsGrid and all across the SportsGrid network. That includes sportsgrid.com/watch, where you can find your favorite destination to consume everything all across the grid. He is Jerry Derry. I'm Ben Stevens. We are here together for the next 3 hours up until 11 a.m. Eastern time. A Monday morning to look back on the second weekend. A sweet and elite weekend in the men's and women's NCAA tournament. The Final Four in the men's big dance is now set. We know the 4 teams still battling it out in the chase for a national championship next Saturday into Monday in San Antonio, because exactly 1 week from tonight, a national champion will be crowned, and a team will stand atop a ladder in the rest of college hoops as they cut down the nets. And Joe, as we might have expected entering the big dance, it is a rather chalky tournament, as we have seen. We'll go around the opening weekend in Major League Baseball as well. The early storylines to begin this season on the diamond. We've got 2 weeks left, a little bit shy of that, remaining in the regular season. Things got a little bit chippy last night in Minneapolis. A lot to get you all caught up on here on a Monday morning, looking back on the weekend that was across the sports landscape.
And what a weekend it was, Ben. I mean, when you got the Marlins walking off every game with a win, what's up is down, what's left is right, and I am all for it, my man.
Final Four in the men's NCAA tournament is now determined. The 4 tickets punched this weekend. A doubleheader of action on Saturday night. A doubleheader of action yesterday on a Sunday afternoon into the evening hours. Joe, let's start with the #1 overall team. For the second time in program history, the Auburn Tigers are still dancing, earning a Final Four spot. The Tigers handling Michigan State yesterday, 70-64, covering as a 5.5-point favorite. Now, MSU did make that spread a little bit dangerous in the final 2-3 minutes of regulation, but Auburn does prevail even after a scary moment midway through the second half. Janai Broome exited, looked like he told his team and head coach Bruce Pearl that he was done, only to pull a Willis Reed or Paul Pierce and come back into the game, scoring 25 points to lead Auburn to their second ever Final Four appearance, the #1 overall seed. The Tigers are dancing into the heart of Texas.
Yeah, a little chalky, but as usual, neither of those games yesterday, especially this one, I think was particularly close. There was never a question, I think, of whether or not Auburn was going to be able to pull away and win this game. I think the final score is not indicative of just how much better they were than Michigan State yesterday. But great win. Hopefully Johnny Broome will get healed up here, and there won't be any excuses for when Florida waxes him coming up.
Ayo, 25 points, 14 boards for Johnny Broome, the SEC Player of the Year to lead Auburn. Only Tahad Pettiford off the bench, that backup point guard, but the outstanding freshman from Jersey City, the only other Tiger to score in double figures. Rough day for Michigan State, whose offense did trail behind at times this year, 34.4% from the field for the Spartans on Sunday evening. How about Sunday afternoon? It was all Houston from tip to finish. The Cougars never trailed against Tennessee, and Houston is back in a Final Four for the second time in the last 5 seasons, dismantling the Volunteers 69-50. Houston easily covers as a 2.5-point pregame favorite. Joe, a total that was already minimal. Welcome to Houston basketball. 126.5 does stay under as the Vols barely get to 50.
Boy, if you liked watching paint dry, that first half was fantastic, man, in that game. Really, I want to thank Tennessee for showing up with their 15 points. That was great. But give credit to Houston. They are who they are. They know who they are. They have one of the all-time greatest head coaches in the game, and he's got these kids believing. And I got news for you. The only fear I have with them is that the team they got to play next, will there be a letdown if they actually win that game? Because that is, to me, probably going to be better than whatever we get in the final.
So that is the Final Four. We had our 2 spots yesterday. Houston, the champions of the Midwest region in Indy. Auburn, the number 1 overall seed. The champions of the South Regional Final in Atlanta. Auburn will take on Florida in an all-SEC Final Four. We'll recap how the Gators got there in just a moment. And the national championship favorites all tournament long, the Duke Blue Devils, the champions of the East region, will take on Houston. The Blue Devils dominant on Saturday evening at the Rock in Newark, blowing out Alabama by 20, 85-65. A brilliant defensive display out of Duke, Joe, to hold the Crimson Tide to their second lowest scoring output all season long. Duke easily covers as a 5.5-point favorite, knocking off the Crimson Tide.
Another game that really was kind of never in doubt. I don't think at any point in that game, Ben, did we look at it and be like, all right, Bama's got a shot. No. Bama never had a shot in that game. Just too much defense, too much length, too much athleticism on Duke. And I think you could see it in Nate Oates' face, too, that he knew his team was in trouble in that first half.
Yeah, 6.5-point favorite, the closing number for the Blue Devils. They do cover. If you have been a 6-point favorite or better, 32-2 straight up in the men's NCAA tournament. And because of it, a total, Joe, that closed at 174.5 stays well under. How about the first game in the Elite Eight on Saturday evening, our West Regional Final out in San Francisco. Florida trailing by as many as 10 points with about 5.5 minutes remaining. The Gators storm all the way back to edge out Texas Tech, led by Walter Clayton Jr. in a brilliant 30-point performance. Florida ends the game on an 18-4 run against the Red Raiders to win 84-79. The Gators do not cover as a pregame 7.5-point favorite, but Florida into the Final Four for the first time in more than a decade.
This tournament is so good, Ben, because it truly creates some superstars, and it really shows you, it separates the men from the boys. And when the game was on the line again, and those that haven't been following Florida, Walter Clayton with the ball in his hands when it matters the most I can't think of anybody else, and you can make the argument with Cooper Flagg, but at this point, I wouldn't want anybody else handling the ball than him when the game mattered the most.
Unconscious from 3 at times, just hoisting with a green light and scoring a 30-point performance to lead that comeback effort for Florida against Texas Tech. Let's get to the women's NCAA tournament. First day of the Elite Eight yesterday in the first 2 spots in the Final Four. go to our top two seeds. The number one overall seed, UCLA, in a hard-fought battle against LSU, wins by 7, 72-65. First appearance in the Final Four ever for UCLA women's hoops. And the reigning national champs in South Carolina. Not easy yesterday against the Duke Blue Devils, but still getting a big win, 54-50, to get back to yet another Final Four under Dawn Staley.
Got to give them credit here. I mean, in both tournaments, Ben, a lot of blue bloods going to be playing for a national championship, and I'm all for it. That's the way it ultimately should be.
The cream rises to the top. We'll talk more about that throughout both of our tournaments in just a matter of moments. What was finally made official yesterday, Joe, long expected. Kevin Willard, now the new head coach at Villanova, leaving a path of wreckage behind him in College Park.
Yeah, that might have been the worst kept secret in all of the tournament there, Ben, was Willard leaving to go to Villanova. No kidding. I was shocked.
Yeah, Kevin Willard, not exactly a man of his word, if he even has one or a backbone at this point. The New York Yankees, the hottest offense in Major League Baseball to begin. They blow out the Brewers again, Joe, winning the finale 12-3.
All sorts of records broken there for the Yankee franchise in that first series here. I'm wondering if I can do the same thing with my golf clubs that they do with their bats now here, Ben.
Yeah, just expand the face a little bit, Joe. A 12-3 win, 36 total runs scored for the Yanks this year. More on the early line up next.
You are banking on a guy that's got one Sweet 16 berth in his career.
How many years has he been a D1 head coach?
What, I think 15?
18.
This clown is walking into that tradition. Let me tell you something, bro. You just stepped into the hot seat, because if you don't turn it around quick at Villanova, they're going to boo you out of there just like they boo you out of College Park tonight.
Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start, so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're gonna go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's gonna help me get the job done. There is not gonna be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The Final Four in the 2025 Men's NCAA Tournament is now set. How did we arrive at the four teams still in the chase for a national championship in San Antonio on Saturday evening? That's what we describe here in this opening hour to recap all of our reactions from an Elite Eight weekend in men's college hoops. In German area, it should be no surprise that the four teams still dancing into San Antonio, the four number one seeds. And for the first time since 2008, second time ever in the history of the Big Dance, we see all 4 1 seeds in the Final Four. It does not happen in a tournament often defined by its chaos, known for its madness. But this year, maybe we should have expected it. With all 4 teams on the one line, having a Ken Pom net rating of plus 35 or better, 4 of the best teams in college basketball we have seen in the last 2.5 decades. So, of course, all 4 get to San Antonio. Let's start with the number 1 overall seed, the Auburn Tigers, in the South Region, in South Regional Final yesterday evening in Atlanta, Georgia, against the 2 seed in Michigan State. Could Tom Izzo and the Spartans play spoiler? Auburn, who had struggled down the stretch of the regular season into the SEC tournament, dropping 3 of their final 4, entering the big dance. Would this be their undoing? Not quite. The Tigers win by 6, 70-64. Auburn covers as a 5.5-point favorite to claim the South Regional crown in Atlanta. A total of 147.5 does stay well under as well. And Joe, we said it, that final score with Auburn still covering, but only by the hook, not truly indicative of how dominant the Tigers were really from about the 15-minute mark in the opening half until about the 3-minute mark in the second half, when finally Jaden Akins and MSU got going offensively. But it was mostly an all-Auburn game in Atlanta, Georgia yesterday evening.
It was all Tigers all day. And we kind of knew that this was going to be the biggest test for Michigan State, that a team that, let's be honest here, Ben, could not shoot the 3. Had done a really good job of playing very bad in the first half, but managing to be able to limit the opponents in the second half to give themselves a chance to come back and win some games. But that was simply because other teams couldn't make shots in the second half, but that was not the case.
Yeah.
I think Auburn won that game in the first half. I think at that point, what you saw there, it was a different beast for Michigan State. They were not at any point, to me, coming back in that game in the second half.
Yeah, Joe, and that was really the story of this game. Auburn had gotten off to some slow starts in the opening half and early in the second half, as was on full display in the Sweet 16 Friday night against Michigan, trailing by 9 points with about 12.5 minutes remaining before they rallied to hammer the Wolverines, winning that game by double digits. At the 15:50 mark in the opening half, a Cohen Carr dunk for MSU put Sparty in front 8-6. That was the last time Michigan State led in the game. Auburn responded with a 17-zip run and never looked back. The Tigers led by 9 at the break, led by double digits for a good majority of the second half. Michigan State kept it close and respectable, but never really got into a single possession, Joe, at least what that deficit was throughout the final 20 minutes of regulation. The undoing for Michigan State was a slow offensive day where your veteran guards really struggled. Jaden Akins really until the end of the game still ended at 6 of 17 from the floor. Jace Richardson, the freshman, very talented, but 4 of 13. You had Trey Holloman off the bench, 0 for 10, including 0 of 5 from deep. The Spartans as a team shooting worse than 35%, 34.4. But one of the stories of the game, Joe, Janai Broome, the SEC Player of the Year, in contention for the Wooden Award as well. 25 points, 14 boards, had a double-double at the half, was injured, though, early in the second. A weird elbow injury where, as he was walking off with the help of training staff for Auburn, looked at Bruce Pearl, looked at his players and said, I'm done. But he still did make his way back to help Auburn ice out a victory in winning that game again by 6, 70-64. A good performance out of Janai Broome, even with that scary moment midway through the second half.
Well, that's what leaders do. I mean, you know, when he decided to come back for his 12th year in college basketball, Ben, I think it was inevitable that we'd probably get a moment like this where we watch a 30-year-old roll out with a broken arm there and win the game for him. But honestly, I didn't have that on my bingo card. I thought they had more than enough without him, even to go ahead and beat what Michigan State was putting out on the court, which was just not enough shooting, man. I mean, it just, you know, you can get to the Elite Eight with that kind of team with Michigan State and Izzo, but are you really going to get beyond that? Are you going to win anything when you can't hit threes when it matters the most? Just not a great shooting team for Izzo this year. That was the bottom line.
Yeah, it certainly was. And listen, for Michigan State to get back to this point after a few down years in East Lansing, I think it reinforces the legend that is Tom Izzo, even appearing in the Elite Eight for the 11th time, the most for any head coach in the last 30 seasons in college hoops, when Izzo took the mantle, of course, in East Lansing. He got the 360 career Big Ten wins this year, the most Big Ten victories in the conference of any head coach ever. Just came up short for MSU based on a poor offensive performance. But, Joe, for Auburn to get to the Final Four, maybe expected through a good majority of this college basketball campaign, and certainly as the number one overall seed. But the way the Tigers were performing entering the big dance, losing 3 of their Final 4, there were questions. And Auburn did not necessarily look crisp in their first 3 games of the tournament until yesterday, playing with that fire and passion once again and pulling off a performance. The Tigers 32-5. They were a slight favorite to get to the Final Four to win the South region when the tournament got underway. You see the numbers, though, before this year got started. 20-1 to win a national championship. Auburn into a Final Four for just the second ever time in program history, both under the guidance of Bruce Pearl.
Listen, they were the number one team in this country, Ben, it feels like, for 3/4 of the season. Despite what you saw down the stretch, they exhaled a little bit there, but when it matters the most, number one teams tend to show up, and they have shown up.
Still a 5-1 price on the Tigers, the longest of the 4 to win a national championship in San Antonio. We'll take an early look at those matchups on Saturday night a little bit later on. We continue our recaps next.
Hey sports fans, here's a tip to keep in mind the next time you make your betting picks. According to research, home field advantage is no joke, especially in those playoffs. In the NBA and the NFL postseason, the home team typically has a 64% shot at victory. Now, go get lucky. See you in Las Vegas. Let's get lucky.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're gonna go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's gonna help me get the job done. There is not gonna be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Our Elite Eight Sunday recap continues live right here on a Monday morning on the early line on SportsGrid. He is Joe, I am Ben. So the Auburn Tigers, the number 1 overall seed, victorious in Atlanta, Georgia in the South Regional Final. That was the final game of Sunday. It got started in the afternoon hours, a little bit before 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Midwest Regional Final in Indianapolis, a matchup of the top 2 teams in that portion of the bracket. that play a very similar style of basketball. Elite defensively, grind you out. Houston and Tennessee. And for a second time, Joe, in the last 5 seasons, Kelvin Sampson and his Cougs continue their dance all the way to a Final Four. Houston took an early lead, 4-zip over the Vols, and never looked back. From tip to close, all Houston yesterday in Indy, inside Lucas Oil Stadium. A stifling defensive effort against the Volunteers as Houston wins by 19, 69-50, easily covering as a 2.5-point favorite. And again, indications of what this game would be just in the pregame over-under, closing at 126.5. It stays well under because of that Cougars defense.
Listen, Ben, it got steamed, that total yesterday, because it was as down as low as 122.5, 123. And all of a sudden, the over money, people going, absolutely not. We're going to get a ton of points. And then Tennessee shows up and drops a total of 15 points in the first half. And you're going, yep, that's Houston. Not to mention the amount of Tennessee money that was also steamed late yesterday, Ben, dropping Houston down to what, 2.5 in that game? There were a lot of folks that thought, because, and this is where recency bias in this tournament comes into play, Ben, which is so dangerous. Everybody watched Tennessee bulldoze Kentucky and saw, of course, Houston barely get by Purdue, who was playing in their backyard, by the way. What a difference a couple of days makes in the NCAA tournament, Ben.
Not the greatest draw for a team on the one line to be in the Midwest Regional semifinal and have to play a road game against Purdue in Indianapolis. But they handle that courtesy of one of the most beautiful inbounds plays you will ever see. Milos Uzan delivering the winner for Houston on Friday night. It was everybody for the Cougs on a Sunday afternoon. Emmanuel Sharp, huge at the end. 16 points and a couple of clutch made threes. He started 1 of 7, buried his final 3 to ice out Tennessee late in that second half when the Vols did cut it to an 11-point deficit. And L.J. Cryer, the veteran, who had 30 points against Gonzaga in the round of 32, 17 yesterday to lead Houston. And, Joe, to your point, the Volunteers were atrocious yesterday offensively. They finally get to 50, but they shot 29% from the floor, 5 of 29 from beyond the arc, and a lot of those made threes in the second half. They only had 1 in the opening half. They only had 15 points in the first 20 minutes against the Cougs, the most efficient defense in college basketball all year long. Joe, those 15 points scored by the Volunteers in the opening half, the fewest amount of points by a 1 or 2 seed in any half in the history of the NCAA tournament on the most significant of stages in an Elite 8. That's a difficult pill to swallow if you are the Volunteers, as Tennessee as a program still hunting down that first ever appearance in a Final Four.
But Ben, from our perspective, though, it's kind of hilarious that it's a Rick Barnes coach team that ends up scoring 15 points. I'll say it. I know you're thinking it, so I'll say it, Ben Stevens.
Say it.
Yes. Shocker to nobody that a Rick Barnes coach team ends up being that ridiculously bad in the biggest moment on the biggest stage in the biggest game of the season, and they missed their first 14 shots from three-point range. Man, they weren't even trying to get it in the paint. They knew they couldn't score in the paint against Houston. Crazy.
Second consecutive trip, Joe, for Tennessee to an Elite 8 under Rick Barnes, still looking for that first ever Final Four appearance. Rick Barnes, this was his 29th time leading a team to the NCAA tournament. Only 1 Final Four berth to show for it way back in 2003, guiding the Texas Longhorns. Meanwhile, for Kelvin Sampson, Rick Barnes' good friend, they grew up in North Carolina. They played collegiate basketball against one another. Kelvin Sampson has led Houston to a second Final Four bid in the last 5 years. So if the Cougs had to go to Indianapolis to play a road game in the Sweet 16, at least they head back to their home state in the heart of Texas to San Antonio for a Final Four run. A little bit more on Houston and their opponent in the Final Four and Duke up next.
Did you know sportsbooks tend to draw up tighter bet lines for events that get even more bettors, like championship games or major matchups? My tip? Try betting on less popular sports. You might have a better shot at beating those odds. Now, go get lucky. See you in Las Vegas. Let's get lucky.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
The Final Four in San Antonio for the 2025 Men's NCAA Tournament is now set, and just for the second time ever in the history of the Big Dance, it is all four of the one seeds that make up the Final Four. Yesterday's Elite Eight action, Midwest Regional Final in Indianapolis, Houston dominant from the very start all the way through 40 minutes to the very end. They blow out Tennessee, winning by 19, 69-50. Joe, we said it right before the break. The coaching relationship between Houston's Kelvin Sampson and Tennessee's Rick Barnes was a storyline entering yesterday. They are great, great friends. They both grew up in the state of North Carolina. They played collegiate basketball against one another. They coached against each other in the Red River rivalry back in the days of the Big 12 between Oklahoma and Texas when Sampson was in Norman and Barnes, of course, in Austin. So facing off yesterday, a huge storyline. The two winningest active D1 men's basketball head coaches without a national championship trophy to show for it on their shelf. Rick Barnes entered yesterday with 836 career wins, only one Final Four berth. Kelvin Sampson entered yesterday with career win 797. Make that 798, still in the hunt for that national championship. And what he has done in H-Town, and in his 11 years there as the head coach, reinvigorating a proud Houston program that under Guy Lewis in the days of Phi Slamma Jamma, and you had Hakeem, and you had Clyde, you had some of the greatest basketball we had seen in the mid-'80s. Kelvin Sampson brought Houston back to a Final Four for the first time since 1984 and 2021. They will now reach the Final Four for a second time in a 5-year span here in 2025, heading back to their home state, heading to San Antonio in a Final Four.
Yeah, I mean, and that you're right. That program there, Ben, has gone through some heartbreak, right? Most Final Four appearances without a national title. That's 7 now Houston has been to. But there is something very, very different about this Houston team than what we have gotten in recent past here with Coach Sampson. And that is, we've always known they're capable of limiting you to 15 points and a half, man, and ending the game in the first half. They do that better than anybody, absolutely anybody. But it's what most people haven't figured out or didn't know was that Houston's the best three-point shooting team in the country. They have shooters this year, Ben, that they've never had in the past. When you're converting almost 38, 39, nearly 40% of your threes on a season? We don't know that from Houston, but that's what this Houston team is, which makes them extremely dangerous and extremely undervalued right now, thanks to the Duke Blue Devils.
And Joe, because of it, Houston is a much better team than they have been in this six-year consecutive run, which is now the longest active national streak of reaching the Sweet 16. That is what Houston has done. And in the last 6 years, they have 3 Elite Eight berths to show for it, and now 2 spots in a Final Four. But in the 5 years prior to this one, they did not rank inside the top 100 nationally in three-point percentage. They're efficient offensively because of how slow they play. That's been the story the last couple of years. Top 20 in offensive efficiency each of the last 5 seasons. But this year, Joe, entering yesterday at 39.8% from 3. Best three-point shooting team by percentage in the country. But they were playing inside a football stadium this past weekend. Maybe that will help them with the sight lines inside the Alamo Dome, another big arena in San Antonio. They didn't shoot the three all that well. Emmanuel Sharp at the end, great. LJ Cryer found his footing a little bit yesterday as well. Houston is a very dangerous team who will be an underdog against Duke. The Cougs, though, entered this year tied for the 4th best price to win a national championship at 12-1, alongside conference mate and preseason number 1 in Kansas. The Cougs will be there. What a dominant stretch for Houston in the Big 12 and beyond that, led by Kelvin Sampson. But, Joe, the team we expected to be in San Antonio, the team we expected to be a national championship frontrunner all season long and even before the big dance, that is the Duke Blue Devils. And that is who Houston will see on Saturday night. Duke absolutely dismantling Alabama in the East Regional Final on Saturday evening in Newark, New Jersey. The Blue Devils blowing out Bama, winning by 20, 85-65. Duke covers as a 6.5-point pregame favorite. A pregame total of 174.5 stays well under because of brilliant defense by Duke and a very off shooting night for Alabama that maybe used up all of their three-point prowess, setting that record of 25 made triples on Thursday night in the Sweet 16 against BYU.
Yeah, and by the way, just as a side note, keep in mind, this Houston team, majority of this team was also there a year ago when Duke knocked them out in the Sweet 16 because they didn't have Jamal Sheed healthy, and they lost 54-51. That's going to be an interesting motivating factor coming into it here, but Duke is not the same team from a year ago either. This is a much different team, much more stacked, much more offensively efficient. This is a machine. That's basically what Duke is. They're long, they're athletic. The IQ, and just watching them play against Alabama, it's just unbelievable, the basketball IQ that we're witnessing here. And even though Cooper Flagg, well, we all agree is the number 1 pick in the NBA draft, right, if he wants to go, even though he didn't have the best shooting night, the way he was able to affect the game, doing everything else from assists to defense to blocking to getting other guys involved, this is a very, very scary team. This looks and feels a lot like some of those Christian Laettner, Hurley teams all the way back then for Duke. Purely dominant and just a cut above everyone else is what they look like.
Yeah, certainly so, Joe. Alabama set an NCAA tournament record on Thursday against BYU with 25 made threes. They were 25 of 51, 8 of 32, 25% against Duke. And that was a cold night for sure, but Duke was making nothing easy for the Crimson Tide. Not for Mark Sears, not for Chris Youngblood, not for Aiden Holloway off the bench. It was that brilliant Duke defense on display. Second lowest scoring output for the Tide this year, just 65 points for a team that led the nation with more than 91 points per game entering this weekend in college basketball, and a very balanced effort for Duke on the other side. Cooper Flagg, 16 points, 9 boards, 3 dimes, but it was his fellow freshman Con Knippel, 21 points to lead the Blue Devils on Saturday night. Again, when we look at this Duke team, 3rd year of the John Shire era in Durham, of course, taking over for his former coach and one of the greats to ever do it in Mike Krzyzewski. but this is the first time under Shire Duke will be in a Final Four. Expected, but realized. Because, Joe, when you set goals and when you have the odds to be the national championship favorite before the year gets started at plus 950, will you maximize that opportunity the Blue Devils have? And the Blue Devils will enter San Antonio at a very short plus 105 price to win a national crown.
Yeah, and I'd like to say it's ridiculously overvalued, but they're not. They should be the favorite, given what we have seen from this team, the health of this team, the competition that they've had to go through. Doesn't matter that they play in the ACC anymore, does it, Ben? Even though it was the worst ACC season on record, it doesn't matter. They're beating everybody in their path, and they're doing it systematically, which is even more impressive.
It really, really is what this Duke team has. They have the 5 outstanding freshmen led by Cooper Flagg, Con Knipple, and Kamon Malawach in that starting 5. But they've got the veteran experience to blend with Tyrese Proctor, with the transfer from Tulane and Sion James, the transfer from Purdue in Mason Gillis, who will play in his second consecutive Final Four, and probably some more help on the way this weekend in Texas with the return of front court depth in Malik Brown. We think that he should be available to go for the Final Four. Duke opens as a 4.5-point favorite against Houston. Just the second game this year for the Cougs, booked as an underdog. Plenty more on the early line up next.
Did you know sportsbooks tend to draw up tighter bet lines for events that get even more bettors, like championship games or major matchups? My tip? Try betting on less popular sports. You might have a better shot at beating those odds. Now, go get lucky. See you in Las Vegas. Let's get lucky.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're gonna go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's gonna help me get the job done. There is not gonna be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Continuing to recap Elite 8 weekend and the 2025 Men's NCAA Tournament, how all 4 spots in the Final Four were claimed, featuring for just the second time ever in the history of the Big Dance, all 4 1 seeds in the Final Four. So we showed you Auburn in the South Regional Final yesterday. They were the 1 seed, number 1 overall seed in this NCAA tournament field. Houston, the 1 seed in the Midwest region, a victory in dominant fashion over Tennessee in Indianapolis. Then back to Saturday, Duke dominant against Alabama, the 1 seed in the East region. And how about that 1 seed out west, taking on the only 3 seed in the Elite Eight, that being Texas Tech. And for a while, Joe, it did seem as though the Gators might be the first 1 seed to be plucked off, to be sent home. They were down by 10 points with just about 5.5 minutes remaining, down by 9 with fewer than 3 minutes left in regulation. But there goes Walter Clayton Jr. in the clutch once again. Florida ends the game on an 18-4 run against the Red Raiders to win 84-79. Now, Texas Tech does cover as a 6.5, 7.5 point underdog. A total of 157 in a hook does find its way over, but Florida emerges victorious, back into the Final Four for the first time since 2017. A big victory for, 2014, a big victory for Florida, led by Walter Clayton Jr., the clutch 30-point performance, and Thomas Houck, 20 points off the bench as well for the Gators.
Depth, always one of those things that I've been saying, Ben, that is a absolute plus for this Florida team, that they can have guys coming off the bench who can drop double digits. We saw a couple of games ago, Walter Clayton not be anywhere to be found. Didn't matter. The bigs ended up winning the game along with the bench. They've got a lot of different ways and a lot of different guys that can beat you on this Florida team. And don't forget, as good as Walter Clayton was in this game, and big players make big plays in the big spots, right? We see it every tournament, right? We saw it with UConn over the last couple of years. We're seeing it with Walter Clayton right now with Florida. But I think there is something to be said about a team, Ben, that has been pushed and has their back up against the wall in these spots and knows how to win games when it matters the most. I don't know if the other 3 teams, have we seen any of them be pushed like Florida's pushed and have to dig deep in order to be able to come back and win? There's something to be said here with 2 games remaining. How will the other teams fare if they're down in that same situation there, Ben? That's a big question. I don't think we have a question anymore with what Florida will do. I think there's a big question with what the other 3 remaining teams would do.
And Joe, Florida was the best cover team of all the 1 seeds. In fact, of any of the top teams on the 1 or 2 line entering the big dance, 26-8 against the spread. A magical run to win the SEC tournament title. They had won 12 of their last 13 games entering the NCAA tournament, covering in all 12 victories. In fact, they've only covered once so far in their 4 wins in the big dance. That dismantling of Maryland in the second half in the Sweet 16. Did not cover as a 29.5-point favorite against Norfolk State in the opener. Still won that game by 26. Were tested by UConn. They needed Walter Clayton Jr. down the stretch in that one against the 2-time reigning champs in the round of 32. Again, they did hammer Maryland, but only were up by 2 at the break against the Terps. And, of course, rallying from down by 10 points with less than 5.5 minutes remaining. And it was Walter Clayton Jr. and Thomas Houck combining to make 4 triples in the last 5.5 minutes to provide that comeback spark for the Gators. Joe, for Texas Tech, a valiant effort. And, of course, they completed the improbable comeback against Arkansas, down by as many as 16 points in the second half, down by 13 with 4.5 minutes remaining in the Sweet 16 against the Razorbacks on Thursday night out in San Francisco. And it was Darian Williams, the hero on Thursday, 23 points to lead Texas Tech on Saturday night, but a big missed 3 that would have tied the game with about 1.5 minutes remaining. A great run for Texas Tech and some very helter-skelter performances down the stretch in their final 2 games of the big dance. They do go out with a cover as a 6.5, 7.5 point underdog, but Florida gets the victory and heads to a Final Four. And Joe, of all the 1 seeds, from where they stood in the preseason to where things are right now, the Gators were the least expected of all 4 to get to this point. Tied for the 20th best price at a 60-1 number to win a national championship before this year got underway. Tied for the 20th shortest number at 15-1 to reach the Final Four. And here the Gators are for the first time since the end of the Billy Donovan era. He last led Florida to a national semifinal in 2014. Todd Golden, in his 3 years in Gainesville, now has the Gators embarking to a Final Four here in 2024-25.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they weren't exactly looked at very highly early on in the season and even preseason, but what we watched was a team, it felt like playing in the toughest conference in the country. Boy, not only did they start to look really good, but you had mentioned it, they were the best covered team, and they were, mean, they were covering games left and right. They were an ATM machine all year long, and it felt like here comes the coming out party from a bunch of guys, by the way, that transferred in from, I don't know, places like Iona, Belmont. These were all guys that did not play with one another a whole heck of a lot. And all of a sudden they showed up and Golden puts it together, and now they're in the Final Four. And keep in mind, by the way, they only come back in that game against Tech. Making the shots is one thing, Ben, but you got to get stops. Defensively, nobody talks about how good this Florida team is when it matters the most.
Absolutely so, Joe. And they got stops, and they have some of that veteran experience led by Elijah Martin, who was a part of the FAU magical Final Four run just a few years ago. So it's an all-SEC Final Four matchup in our opening game of the night next Saturday in San Antonio. And Florida is the favorite against the number 1 overall seed in Auburn. The Gators a 2.5-point favorite. These two conference mates only met once this year. It was on the road for the Gators, on the plains, in Auburn. And Florida won outright as a 10.5-point dog, 90-81. Plenty more to discuss for the Final Four up next.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. You studied the stats. You had the perfect bracket until your upsets turned into regrets. SportsGrid rides the highs and lows of every buzzer beater, bracket buster, and Cinderella story.
The Big Ten Freshman of the Year!
Our team brings you sharp insights, real-time reactions, and all the madness. Only on SportsGrid.
If you look at how the men and women did it, the men, the portal opened up the day after the round of 32. Same thing with the women. Men on Monday, women on Tuesday. Why can't they just do the day after the national championship game when the season ends, next season begins, then you open up the portal. All teams have completed play. All bets are off.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
The opening 2 weekends of the 2025 Men's NCAA Tournament now in the books. We have a full week off until Saturday in San Antonio. We shall never forget. We will always remember. To the Alamo Dome we go for a Final Four in 2025. And Joe, just for the second time ever in the history of the Big Dance, all 4 teams on the one line, all 4 1 seeds continue playing into a Final Four, joining 2008 as the only other year. That Final Four also contested in San Antonio. Duke, Houston, second game of the night. Florida, Auburn, first game of the evening on a Saturday in San Antonio, in all SEC affair. Before we dive into the early looks, Joe, at these Final Four contests, let's take one big picture look at the four teams still in the hunt for a Final Four. Duke remains the national championship favorites at plus 105. Florida, second best price, plus 270. Houston, third best number at 4-1. And despite being the number one overall seed, Auburn actually the longest of the four teams in the Final Four to win a national crown at a 5-1 number. Joe, in your mind at this stage, is there value on a national championship number, or should we just focus on the specific Final Four games that we have?
Well, it's interesting, Ben, because if you are somebody that might be holding future tickets on, let's say, Florida or Houston, well, then you've got some decisions to make, because I believe Auburn is a dog, but not a 5-1 dog, right? So if there's a hedge to be had here and you don't have Duke in your pocket, I don't see a scenario where you're going to get Duke at a better price than this right now here, Ben. Do you?
I do not, Joe. And this is the final day of March.
Yep.
1 week exactly from tonight. Monday, April 7th, the national championship game in San Antonio. And those hypothetical odds are out right now. Things can change. Performances can be dominant. There could be an injury, knock on wood, and God forbid, in the Final Four. But if Houston were to pull the upset against Duke, the Cougs right now are projected as a slight underdog against either of the two teams from the SEC, Auburn and Florida. Duke, meanwhile, at least a 4.5-point favorite against the Gators, projected as a hypothetical 5.5-point favorite against the Auburn Tigers. Duke is that national championship favorite for a reason, but there is some value to be had. So how will we get to Monday night inside the Alamo Dome? Our first game, 6:09 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday. The all-SEC clash between Florida and Auburn. And despite being that top overall team in the bracket, the Auburn Tigers are a 2.5-point underdog. It would be game number 4 only for the Tigers as a dog this year. Early in the year, on the road against Houston, they won outright. Again, in non-conference play, 3.5-point dog on the road in Durham against Duke. Most recently, Auburn on the road as a slight underdog against their rivals in Tuscaloosa. The Tigers won that game outright in a matchup of 1 versus 2 in the AP Top 25 at the time. Joe, does it feel fitting to see Auburn, the number 1 overall seed, even as a slight underdog against the Florida Gators?
Yeah, well, listen, two teams very familiar with one another, right? We caught this last round with Kentucky and Tennessee, although they had already played each other twice this year.
Yeah.
For Florida to have that confidence, to know that they went into Auburn's building and beat them convincingly, by the way. You know, these two teams kind of line up pretty much the same here. And while Auburn was able to, you know, top 10 in adjusted offense and defensive efficiency, well, guess what? Florida was like, yeah, we can match you body for body, length for length, shot for shot. I think it's going to be interesting who has the lead at the break in this game, Ben. I think it's going to have a lot to do with who might actually win this game when it's all said and done.
I would say the opening 20 minutes for Auburn yesterday against Michigan State, their best first half so far in the Big Dance. They covered as a 3.5-point favorite in the opening half against MSU, up by 9. As Joe shared, just one meeting between these two teams, despite being conference foes this year. Maybe the best win in college basketball. Florida on the road as a 10.5-point dog, knocking off the Tigers on the Plains. We'll talk more about that game. Our nightcap on Saturday in the Final Four in the MOP odds, when hour number 2 on TEL comes your way next.